Hello, all. We're going to look at this Realist explanations of crime and deviance. It's worth you knowing that both right realism has come up, so assess right realist explanations of crime and deviance. Left realism once came up, but interestingly, on the mark scheme, it incorporated all of realism. So I thought that was quite interesting, but it was a very, very, very long time ago. So in terms of realist explanations of crime and deviance, I'm going to do left realism first. So first of all, I'm going to kind of maybe do the introduction actually a little bit. So left realist explanations focus on victims. So left realist explanations focus on victims that are disproportionately working class and ethnic minorities. So left realist explanations do focus on victims that are disproportionately working class and ethnic minorities. And they consider fear of crime shapes individuals' lives. And this is particularly true of women. Women restrict their day-to-day practices due to fear of crime. Left realist explanations focus on subculture, blocked opportunities, relative deprivation, and marginalisation. So their explanations focus on subculture, relative deprivation, and marginalisation. Right realism, because I'm going to do both. Right realist explanations focus on inadequate socialisation. Those explanations focus on inadequate socialisation. So they focus on inadequate socialisation, and their theories are about providing solutions due to the failure of sociological theory. So left realism is focusing on blocked opportunities, relative deprivation, and marginalisation, but right realists' explanations solely focus on inadequate socialisation, and their theories are about providing solutions due to the failure of sociological theory or ideas. So what they look at is target hardening. They look at target hardening. They look at CCTV. So look at target hardening, CCTV, which is Murray, but I've mentioned the kind of inadequate socialisation, and underclass, and community addressing incivities. So I'm outlining the paragraphs, the 3 points on left realism, and referencing. I know the question says explanations for crime, but right realism doesn't give you that many explanations for crime or deviance. It says the underclass, the welfare state, and inadequate socialisation. And then they spend most of our time offering solutions for crime and deviance. So I'm going to have to gear it in that direction. So paragraph 1, I'm going to do left realism. So Lear and Young, or left realism, argue that subcultures or blocked opportunities cause crime. Subcultures or blocked opportunities cause crime. Young black males or young black groups have distinctly different values from older generations. It's the acceptance of British society. It's the acceptance of British society's norms and values. but blocked opportunities from these, that causes crime. So it's acceptance of British society's values, but blocked opportunities. With him, we're going to add Nightingale. For Nightingale, US black youth have extremely strong consumerist values and desire high status. US black youth have extremely strong consumerist values and desire high status, but are often denied these legitimately through blocked opportunities. For Gilroy, crime by black groups is a political act. So this is young Gilroy. Crime by black groups is a political act against a racist, capitalist system. Crime by black groups is a political act against a racist capitalist system. Okay, those two. This shows left realist explanations explain material crime. This shows left realist explanations explain material crime, which is the result of blocked opportunities, and it means individuals innovate. So left realists explain material crime, which is the result of blocked opportunities. It means individuals innovate or engage in crime, individuals innovate or engage in crime in order to achieve society's goals. However, Gilroy argues black criminality is a myth used to justify saturation policing. However, Gilroy argues that black criminality is a myth used to justify saturation policing. This suggests realist explanations of crime are incorrect and founded on left realist explanations of crime are incorrect. They're founded on crime statistics that are invalid and merely show the extent of police institutional racism. If you trust those crime statistics, we're going to argue you're trusting statistics that are founded on an institutional racist. That's why the black prison population is 7 times higher. Black men receive more prison sentences than white men for exactly the same crime, because black men are more likely to be remanded in custody before and during a trial. So they're more likely to get a prison sentence than white men for the same crime. Just a bit of bowling in Phillips for you there. So paragraph 2. So left realist explanations of crime and deviance explain a rise in crime. Left realist explanations of crime and deviance actually explain a rise in crime. For Lear and Young, relative deprivation for Lear and Young, relative deprivation, along with subculture and marginalisation, causes crime. Relative deprivation along with subculture and marginalisation causes crime. Remember, it's the three of them. You have to have three. For Rashomon, it is the awareness of the scale of difference in wealth. It's awareness of the sheer scale of difference in wealth. For Lear and Young, kind of moving between them, this is why in the 1930s, high poverty didn't lead to crime. It's why in the 1930s, high poverty didn't lead to crime. And there was a rise in the 1980s. So it's why in the 1930s, high poverty didn't lead to high crime. But there was a rise in the 1980s because there was greater awareness or relative deprivation. For Hall et al., black youth, the reality is often training schemes. For Hall et al., the reality is quite often training schemes, high unemployment. Normally do it the other way, don't they? High unemployment, training schemes, or white man's shit work. And just to add in a third, for Mayhew, it's Piper and Wade, but Mayhew et al., they linked crime with young males from deprived backgrounds, where blocked opportunities are a reality of life. I know the other paragraph 1 is blocked opportunities. You could put them in there, to be fair. Put Mayhew, Piper and Wave in there, given that whole paragraph. How many sociologists have got Nightingale? Yeah, maybe I'll stake him out of there because paragraph 1's blocked opportunities. You gonna let me do it? Cut. I'm going to add you in there. Feels a bit better. Okay, 2 in paragraph 2 then. So, no, there's 3, isn't there? Because including Lear and Young. So this shows, let's check the question, realist explanations. Realist explanations explain a rise in material crime in society. They can explain a rise in material crime within society, as this is due to blocked opportunities. We've already said that, but it's due to blocked opportunities along with awareness of the scale of difference. So it explains a rise in crime, material crime, because it's blocked opportunities along with awareness of the sheer scale of difference in wealth. So it's that rise in crime within wider society because of that awareness of the sheer scale of difference. However, get a bit desperate here. However, for Hughes, left realism relies, I'm kind of similar to that one, maybe Bryce. However, for Bryce, there is a range of responses from black groups. However, for Bryce, there's a range of responses from black groups, and many, or the majority, are conformist. And the majority are conformist despite blocked opportunities, relative deprivation, and police harassment via stop and search. It's a variety of responses to police racism, despite experiencing blocked opportunities, relative deprivation, and police harassment. So their explanations for crime are not accurate, just to come back to the question for an A. Okay, paragraph 3, then I'm going to do a third paragraph on left realism. For left realism, they recognise that there is a policing problem. They recognise there is a policing problem and marginalisation. Crime is caused by subculture, relative deprivation and marginalisation. There's a policing problem or marginalisation. For young, so what I'm going to do, so instead of young, so there's marginalisation. So for Skolnick, I'm going to add in Skolnick, there is a canteen culture that sees offenders as young, male and black. I'm going to do Reiner, similar thing, but macho values. For Reiner, there is an occupational culture that pervades the police force, and it's characterized by macho values. Cynicism and suspicion and racism. Maybe Bowling and Phillips as well. I mentioned it earlier. So Bowling and Phillips found both direct and indirect discrimination within the criminal justice system. So black males are more likely to be remanded in custody before and during a trial. So it's why black men are more likely to get prison sentences or custodial sentences than white groups. And then I'm going to add in Young here now, who argued that there's a problem with over-policing. So we have a problem with over-policing soft drug use. We have a problem with over-policing soft drug use, underage drinking, domestic violence, and corporate crime. You can see the Marxist. And, to be fair, feminist. There's a recognition of women. Okay. So those three. This shows that left realism, realist explanations of crime. It shows that left realist explanations of crime and deviance it shows us that left realist explanations of crime and deviance consider that police racism, is it police? It's all of it, isn't it? They consider that institutional racism. They consider the institutional racism. So they consider the institutional racism marginalizes black communities. They consider that police racism marginalizes black communities, and this can cause non-material crime or non-material acts of deviance due to the amount of frustration. So let's go non-material, that it might explain for why black groups might commit non-material acts of deviance or crime due to the amount of frustration. Okay. However, Phillips and Brown found no evidence. Phillips and Brown found no evidence of a canteen culture. How Phillips and Brown in their observations found no evidence of a canteen culture, suggesting that left realist explanations have a bias. Kind of exaggerate it a bit. They have a bias and do not explain crime correctly. Let's push it, come back to the question. So I've got 3 paragraphs on left realism. I've combined the policing problem with marginalisation to get a beefier paragraph. You know, we aim for 3 sociologists in our paragraphs. So after the left, I'm going to do the right. So right realism, paragraph 4. For Murray, for Murray, right realist explanations, like Murray, explain. They explain, again, a rise in crime. For Murray, the underclass are responsible for a rise in crime. They are a distinguishable group with their own deviant subcultural values. Marriage is separate from child bearing. Acquiring money is separate from work. And men prove masculinity through violence. Going to add in for Farrington and West, so correlation between poor parenting and offending. There's a correlation between poor parenting and offending. And Denzin from first year was concerned with the growth of female-headed lone parent families. This shows right realist explanations explain non-material crime, or they explain they explain violent acts. Let's be specific. Right realist explanations explain violent acts, men prove masculinity for us, and theft, because the underclass are taught to be criminal due to inadequate socialization. Be specific. They explain violence because men are trying to prove masculinity. However, for Brown, the phase of welfare dependency is short. It's on average 2 years, suggesting new right explanations are not statistically accurate. Okay, paragraph 5. New right explanations. New right explanations argue generally that human nature is naturally greedy. So we're all naturally greedy and selfish. So we have to just reduce the opportunities. So we need to spend more time reducing the opportunities rather than discussing it. So for Clark, he advocated target hardening. He advocated target hardening, which is the preemptive identification and targeting of likely pockets of crime or criminal groups. So there are opportunistic criminals, supplementary, and professional. Target hardening. Target hardening will impact on the first two. Target hardening will impact on the first two. I'm going to add in with that, and for Clark and Coleman, because I've only got really one paragraph left after this. For Clark and Coleman, they argue that crime must be deterred via increasing the costs with corporal and capital punishment, along with heavy fines and sentences, heavy sentences. Okay, so those two. This shows new right explanations. This shows that new right explanations of crime shows that new right explanations of crime argue we are all criminal. So these ones are saying we're all criminal, and therefore time and resources should be spent on effective crime prevention. We all do it. So what we need to do is spend more time on effective crime prevention, targeting areas and the death, and reinstating the death penalty. That's what they do if they had their way. Reinstate the death penalty. Remember, however, kind of going into it. However, when target hardening was introduced, in King's Cross, it showed it merely displaced crime. It moves it. And Texas has capital punishment, has the death penalty, and it has the highest crime rate. Suggests it's not a deterrent. No, Texas is obviously huge, but it's not really working, is it, if it's got the highest crime rate? Okay, number 6, last one. So right realist explanations consider the community. So they consider the community in trying to reduce deviance. I am going off into policy because that's what all New Right talk about, apart from underclass and everyone commits crime, so let's crack on with policy, is their whole notion. For Wilson and Kelling, the community is a key factor behind a rise in crime. The community is a key factor behind a rise in crime. Or I've had key factor in controlling crime. Minor incivilities need to be kept minimal. Minor incivilities need to be kept minimal to prevent a downward spiral to more serious crime. And for Wilson, he advocated zero tolerance and again, when introduced, it halved crime. Okay, this shows, short paragraph, this shows right realist explanations. It shows us that right realist explanations consider the community can reduce deviance if they enforce, if they are effective in controlling low-level acts of deviance like littering and vandalism. They can prevent crime. The community can reduce, let's do community can reduce crime and are effective in controlling and effective, so they can reduce crime if they are effective in controlling low-level acts of deviance like littering and vandalism. However, maybe I need to take that out of there. Target hardening. I think that the King's Cross example is actually for zero tolerance. I think I've got confused. So however, I'm going to take that out of there. When introduced, displace. Oh, so however, Texas has capital punishment has the highest crime rate. And what target hardening do is in violation of the Race Relations Act. So it's effectively a racist policy to target black men, to preempt crime that they've never committed. However, when zero tolerance was introduced in King's Cross, it shows that it merely displaces crime. So we've got a plan. Okay, conclusion. So is left realism a useful explanation for crime and deviance? So in my conclusion, I'm going to argue that realism, let's do left realism, that left realism explains, or left realism considers victims, and it explains material and non-material crime. It considers and explains both material and non-material crime via blocked opportunities and relative deprivation. And they argue that police racism causes non-material crime due to the frustration. And they provide solutions. They argue that we need consensus policing. We need to work with the community as this is how crimes are reported, and the community provide evidence. Right realism is less useful. Its explanations for crime and deviance are so limited. It's inadequate socialization. They seem to have a bias towards wanting to target women and any positive social change that wouldn't benefit them as privileged men. That's my sociological opinion. They don't like any social change that would ultimately, they just want to attack women and target people of colour and argue that that's just effective policy, because they wouldn't be targeted given that they're white men, and when they're just being critical of parenting, what they're actually being critical of is mothers. So what I'd argue is their theories are limited. All they talk about is inadequate socialisation. There's a bias to target women, and any positive social change that would not benefit them as a privileged. And their policies to reduce crime want to target black men and therefore perpetuate racism that ultimately is not acceptable. That's my sociological opinion. You can choose how you find left realism that useful. But the question asked you for explanations, and the only explanations I've got for right realism is underclass, and we're all greedy and selfish, so just introduce lots and lots of policy. Realism, right realism, is all about policy. So it's not as strong on addressing explanations as it should be. And that's why I'm calling them out in the conclusion. You can add at some point, I don't think I've popped it in there, you can add the section 60. It might be a good one to include, given that under section 60, which is 2021, black men are 18 times more likely to be stopped and searched, because police can stop anybody at any time based on suspicion of knives. And so what we know is that when we look at specific legislation that has no suspicion you can stop anybody, we know it's sadly still being targeted on black men. It does suggest left realism might be correct, sadly.